Welcome to the NWR Communications Near-Term Producers Conference. My name is Kerry Stevenson, and next up we have Vault Resources. The ASX code is VRC. Joining me today is Trevor Matthews, the Managing Director, to tell us about why they're a unique battery minerals company. Trevor, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Kerry, and welcome to everybody viewing this conference. So I'll just get right into it. We've got the slide there, and as Kerry said, we see ourselves as a unique battery minerals company, and I think as I move through the presentation, people will understand why we consider that to be. Just the usual disclaimer. So when we look at Vault, what we have is we're a multi-commodity battery minerals company. We see the battery market, and I think everybody's fully aware of what's going on with new energy storage, EVs, and the expected growth in demand for battery minerals over the coming, not just this decade, but future decades, as this all takes hold and drives the massive changes we're going to see as the move shift away from hydrocarbons to other renewable low carbon forms of energy. So in our case, we're targeting to supply Europe and the US lithium-ion battery manufacturers, and we also have other products in the battery mineral space, which we'll talk about in a little bit of time. So we were a producer and still consider ourselves to be, and I'll talk a little bit about our project in the Ukraine soon. But we, well positioned in Europe. We have multiple graphite assets, graphite development project in East Africa, our Ukrainian assets, lithium license applications in Serbia, downstream processing activities in the United States, and also we'll be pushing forward in Europe and developing pretty much an integrated supply chain in the graphite sector. We plan to produce coated spheronized purified graphite, which is battery anode material, and we also have these ultra high purity graphite coatings for other battery technologies that we are currently undergoing test work, and we'll move through to offtake agreements fairly soon. Doing a lot of work in the ESG space internally, and we'll make some further announcements about our overarching policies and principles in relation to that area and how the company will integrate that right throughout its whole business. And we have a very experienced management team, which we'll have a slide on that a little bit further in. Corporately, not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but market cap of only 46 million. We're probably, I consider anyhow, the most undervalued battery minerals company, particularly, with a producing asset, although that's been pretty much written off in the current environment. But I think, there's opportunities for that to come back on, and obviously with the other work that we're doing downstream, we see that we're creating some significant value for shareholders in the longer term. This board and senior management team, you can see that at the operating level, we've got a number of people, COO, financial controller, and 2 VPs working in both Europe and the US. And they're mainly focused on our downstream activities in those locations. So in a high-level view, this is what the Vault strategy looks like. So we have a development project which is right in the funding phase at the moment in Tanzania. That's a large project, one of the largest graphite projects in the world. We plan to ship products that'll be graphite concentrates into mainly Europe, mainly into the United States is where that's targeted, but also into Europe, and some products into China. And then in the Ukraine, we have an operating mine, large resource base. It's Russian code, so we've only been able to disclose a small portion of it, but even that was 22 million tonnes at about 6.8%. Which provides for a multi-decade expanded operation, even just based around that much lower resource base. But there's a lot more tonnes than that in Ukraine. And, hopefully with the right outcomes in Ukraine in the coming months, we'll see that asset back into production. The key there was that was going to supply, or is planned to supply, Europe, our European ambitions in CSPG, and also some products going into the United States as well. And you'll see Serbia highlighted on the map next door. And of course, I've mentioned our lithium license applications there. Overnight, I believe there's been an announcement in relation to Rio moving forward with its lithium project Yada. I haven't got a lot of detail around that, but there's an election there this weekend as well. And I think our applications will soon get granted, and then we'll move into the exploration phase. I think a lithium asset in Europe would be highly valued. And of course, the work that's been going on through the European Battery Alliance and the Raw Materials Alliance in Europe, which are both sponsored by the European Union, European Commission. Europe's desperately trying to basically improve its supply chains and its local production of battery materials. So projects located in Europe will get a lot of support, not just introductions to customers and strategic partners, but also funding for expansions and the development of downstream processing capacity. So likewise in the US, it's not so coordinated there, but there's a lot of government support. And obviously the Biden administration too is putting a lot of focus into the development of renewable energy storage, and obviously the EV market as well. Just looking at our at the sort of demand profile, and you can sort of see, the sort of metrics we're talking about are massive in terms of demand growth just through the course of this decade. And we've already, we're into 2022 already. For graphite, what is the development of the EV market and lithium-ion batteries and use of graphite as the anode in a lithium-ion battery? It's actually the dominant mineral in a lithium-ion battery. There's more graphite than there is lithium, nickel, or any of the other components. So I don't think a lot of people understand just that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because most people are talking, they're all going on about lithium, etc. Graphite's not really coming into conversation very much at the moment.
No, last year was all about lithium and I guess nickel, and of course cobalt's been in the conversation a lot as well. That's more about supply issues. But some of the market research groups and others I talk to say this is the year for graphite, that over the course of this year we're going to see a lot more interest and activity in relation to I guess, looking at how graphite supply is going to respond. When you look at these metrics and see we've got to achieve a 7 times increase in supply to meet demand over the course of this decade, I think there's not much doubt that, we're going to see some supply shortages over the decade. Graphite prices are already up over, about 25% in recent terms. So we're starting to see that reflect in pricing at the moment. So we see a great opportunity here. We're in natural flake graphite space. So there's a couple of different graphites that go into lithium-ion batteries, but fundamentally, this is just natural graphite in that graph. And, with our 2 large-scale mines and the development potential there, we see ourselves being a key part of the supply chain going forward, and obviously getting into downstream manufacturing as well. Zavalievsky currently suspended because of the military, basically the war that's currently undertaken there. One thing I have to say is that we're located in Western Ukraine. You could draw a radius of probably nearly 200 kilometres around the mine, and there is no activity whatsoever. It's in a rural area. It's right over near the border with Moldova in the west. And so the assets and the people are safe. Our senior management team is in Lviv. And I guess, we're just waiting to see, how the war proceeds. Hopefully there'll be some sort of, negotiated ceasefire and settlement at the end of the day between Ukraine and Russia. When that occurs, we'll be ready to restart our business and recommence operations and recommence shipments of product into Europe. Pardon me. So Bunyu Graphite.
Sorry, Trevor, just to go back to the project in Ukraine, that is in production, selling product into EU countries. Given that you've had to stop at the moment, is it a quick restart?
Yeah, it's like we're still being contacted by customers about supply. So even with the current activities, I guess people look at the location and think, you know, there's probably an opportunity to be supplied. You know, our staff are basically sitting there, you know, just we're covering their salaries and living expenses during this time so that, you know, they can continue to look after themselves. But yeah, once the operation is capable of being restarted pretty quickly once we get there. So and then we can recommence, you know, the production and selling of graphite products, and in the longer term, use the Zavalievsky Graphite material to produce these coated spheronized products or battery anode material and some of the other products we're using. So Bunyu's a large project, one of the largest in the world. It's only been explored to about 6% of its project area to get to about number 3 or 4 by resource tonnes globally, 461 million tonnes in resources. 2-stage development strategy, small stage 1 that we're just in the banking phase. We actually have funding discussions pretty much finalised with a couple of groups. Both parties have requested that we have a look at updating our offtake contracts. We have existing contracts with private Chinese groups. I guess this is more project finance. So the request is to put in place probably more transparent offtake partners to be able to get through and get to these funding proposals being formally put in front of us. So this is nearly there. It's a little bit of work. It's not that simple doing offtake contracts in industrial minerals, which graphite's one of them. You know, we're not selling to cell makers or car makers graphite products. We're really selling them to battery anode producers if you're going into the battery space, part of the market, or more traditional markets such as refractories and lubricants and various other flame retardant building materials and the like. So there's a bit of work there, but I'm confident we're going to get there, and this will, you know, be a key part of Volt's supply chain when it's banked and into production. Here we're really looking at CSPG. So this is a cell making capacity, both, you know, current, the 2021 operating additions, and then, you know, what's planned by each of these cell makers. And these are just the largest cell makers, not all of the plans globally. So, but you can see in that light blue part of the chart, the planned expansion capacity by all these groups. And, you know, this is the addressable market. And by the end of this decade, I think, as I've said, you know, the increase in demand for or the requirements to increase supply to meet this demand means that, you know, we're looking at a pretty strong market, and I believe, you know, a very exciting time for Volt shareholders and as we move forward. So if we're looking at this pathway to coated spheronized production, coated spheronized purified graphite production or battery anode material, you know, we have a technical partnership in the States with American Energy Technologies. This is one of our key relationships. They bring all the IP and knowledge base around how to make coated spheronized purified graphite, which is, you know, a lot of companies can make spheronized but can't do the coating. Even the other process steps. Sorry
to interrupt you there, Trevor, but a lot of people won't know why you're going into this coated spherical production. Like, is that added value?
Yeah, probably the next slide, Kerry, and there's some price points in the next slide which will explain it. So,
go ahead.
So this is a key relationship for us, and you know, they're also assisting with our move into using the non-spherical parts. So you don't get 100% yield of graphite in and coated, and particularly spheronized graphite out. We achieve about a 70% yield, which is a really good yield, but you still have 30% as a byproduct. So we've developed markets in the alkaline and lead acid battery space, and we're doing test work and moving through to agreements with Urban Electric Power, which is the fourth bullet point there, UEP, and with a lead acid battery group that we'll name very soon. So these allow us to produce high value byproducts as well, so that every ton of graphite we process through these facilities, we can get high value end products off it, either in the lithium ion battery space or in other battery technologies. We're about to start a DFS or a bankable feasibility study on these facility designs. That's tied in with recent announcements that we've made around our arrangements with energy supply developers, or ESD there in the United States. We're part of a Gigafactory. We are the sole battery anode supplier in that big integrated super site, as they call it. So this site's planned to make about 50 gigawatts of lithium ion battery capacity over the next 3 to 5 years. That would translate into about 60,000 tonnes of battery anode material being required. And that when you see pricing on the next page of about $8,300 a tonne, that's about $500 million US a year in revenue just at that one site over the course of the development. So the feasibility study, in terms of putting some CapEx, OpEx and financial metrics around that development, will be done, will commence soon. I've mentioned ESD, that's a really exciting development for us. They have a number of other suppliers, not just battery anode. They'll have all the battery components in there, including canisters, separators, other raw material suppliers, plus the cell makers in this one facility. So there'll be a stream of announcements from ESD over the coming weeks and next few months. They plan to start production in 6 months. They've got a development funder already in place. Construction engineering and design and construction, like I said, will start in the near future. But the engineering design work's been going on for the last 12 months there, so they're ready to start work soon. Alkaline battery technology, products I've mentioned earlier on. So this is about creating a high value, ultra high purity graphite coating for use in the battery components. So we're coating the cathode and the anode, and also another component inside an alkaline battery to improve its performance. And these are for scaled up batteries for stationary commercial storage, not the little AAA and AA batteries. We're talking the large energy storage utilisation. So it's a large potential market, and we've already announced that we are working with UEP. Test work's underway. We will sign a joint development agreement soon and announce that. And then in addition to that, we've got this lead acid battery work where we're providing coatings for as use as an expander in lead acid batteries, which again is about improving the performance of lead acid batteries. Other developments, we plan to develop other facilities outside of the ESD arrangements that we have in place. So we'll have standalone CSPG production, not only in the United States, but also in Europe. And in the US, we have other work undergoing with another US battery group, which we hope to announce fairly soon. We're going through the test work phase with them. So quite a lot of work going on there. So that's our pathway. They're all the partners where we can announce them that we're working in to get into downstream production in the US, and we can translate all of that across to Europe as well as we move forward. And so this is our pathway, and this is where we talk a bit about metrics. So the three steps are basically the value add steps. So the initial one's obviously mining, where you go through the processing steps to make a graphite product, and that sells for various prices based around grade and flake size. But you're sort of in and around that sort of $1,000 a ton mark on average. When you look at graphite concentrate production then to make a spheronized purified graphite, so you can see we're talking about 70% recovery on the right-hand side through the processing steps to produce that material. That would sell on average for about $3,600. This is uncoated though. And then we have our high purity products, which are yet to be priced, but we think we can make pretty good additional revenue from those, from those processing steps for our ultra high purity alkaline and lead acid battery driven products. And then in the third step, this is where coating comes into play. So you can see that you add a coating step, which we get from our partnership with American Energy Technologies. They have the technology to do coating and that will be provided to us. And then you're looking at nearly $5,000 a tonne more for that sort of product. And the actual cost of doing all of this, there's plenty of studies and other information out in the market. It'll be somewhere around $3,000 to $3,500 a tonne to make CSPG. And, you can see then that your margins are going to be nearly $5,000 a tonne. If you translate that through to the ESD metrics I just spoke about earlier on, doing 60,000 tonnes a year, that's nearly $300 million of effectively EBITDA. So, and valuations, based around earnings would say that, it's a bit of a pathway to go, but we're clearly on this pathway. So I think, for investors looking at a company that's only market capped at $45 million right now, we've got all the partnerships and relationships being announced and coming together, moving into, construction of the facilities by ESD. Great thing about the ESD arrangement is they're spending all the money up front building the facilities. We don't have to spend any capital to get into a point where we just supply the equipment when it's required and then move into production. We'll have an inbuilt customer, which will be the cell maker or cell makers in the facility. Supply chain issues disappear because you're right next door to them. So, the benefits of ESD, there's other benefits at the state level with power and, skilled workforce and these sorts of other attributes that come along with the development. So, and are being negotiated with the states in the state that the plant's going to be located in the US. So I think, you look at these sort of metrics and the things we're doing, both in lithium-ion batteries and other battery technologies in the US. And like I say, all of this can be translated into Europe. Our mine developments and other, activities that we've got underway. And I think, people have pretty much written off, the market has written off Ukraine. It's written off our lithium applications. I think there's a pretty good probability that, these will come back into being opportunities for Volt to, recommence our production of graphite and expand production in Europe, move through to exploration in lithium in Serbia in time. And also, with our African development project, move through the funding phase there, and of course push on with our downstream processing activities. Currently, very much focused in the US, but you'll see more announcements around what we're doing in Europe in the near future. So yeah, happy to hand over to Q&A now if there's any.
All righty, thank you, Trevor. About the project in the Ukraine, given obviously it's a shocking situation in the Ukraine and we feel for those people, but the question is, has that second payment, which is due shortly to the two shareholders, has that been deferred? And if it has been deferred, what's the new payment date?
It's due at the end of July, so that's 4 months away from now. The war's been underway for a little over a month now. It's a material adverse event, so that triggers certain a holding status, if you like, in relation to the arrangements. We've started the dialogue with the lawyers about renegotiating the payment timing and probably the payment arrangements for that deferred payment. So it's a little bit difficult negotiating, these things when there's a war on, and the people that we're negotiating with, which is actually not two parties, there's three shareholders. So, we will progress it. I'm pretty certain we'll get a positive outcome there, and we'll be able to push those deferred payments back to align with, the outcome, in relation to the invasion or the settlement of, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and the recommencement of production, so that, the value that sits there is more aligned with the timing of the second payment to the shareholders. So yeah, more news to come on that, but absolutely we will be doing
things could also change pretty quickly. It's a movable situation at the moment. Offtake agreements for Bunyu, when do you think those will be finalised?
Working pretty hard at them. Look, I think I'd like to think that we can finish them in the next month or two. We have some discussions, and well, more than discussions, we've been exchanging information with a couple of off-takers that would tick the box with the financiers. So I'm hopeful of getting those finalised in the coming months. But I must warn people that, these are quite complex agreements when you get into them. They've got to be structured in a way that are acceptable to the banks. They have to be binding. They're always about future production. And bear in mind, we're talking about graphite that goes into a range of markets. So finding customers that want all of, material that could go to batteries, but also the coarse flake material isn't used in battery making, or battery anode production. It's used in other, probably foils and thermal shields and flame retardant building materials, the coarse material. So you're talking about quite diverse markets. So this is not a simple thing to find the right customers or mix of customers to put these in place. And of course, you've got to find customers that have an appetite for, looking at product that won't be delivered for maybe 18 months. So it's a little bit more complicated than what people imagine or think.
Okay, there's other questions, but we've run out of time. I'm going to ask you this final one, Trevor. What do you intend to do with your gold licenses?
The gold licenses, I haven't really touched on those. We've said in the past that we would like to pair our focus back to just the battery minerals sector. We're having a look at some options. We've had some discussions with third parties about either vending the assets into another company in exchange for equity, maybe people groups earning in, or potentially even floating them off with some other gold assets. So those discussions are still going on. We're trying to make sure we do the right deal for Volt, and that we get value for those assets that will benefit all the shareholders. So, but yes, there is work underway. But like I said, we want to make sure we make the right decision there.
All right, we are out of time. Trevor Matthews, Managing Director of Volt Resources. Thanks so much for giving us an update today.
Great. Thank you, Kerry.